speaking of holiday laziness, let's talk about ChatGPT. We haven't talked about AI enough in these podcasts, but since it's the year of AI, let's dive into it, because I think it was, what was it? Ars Technica had an article that came out about how ChatGPT was getting lazy during the winter break.
Yeah, I thought this was hilarious. And obviously, I think there's been some updates that have kind of proven that the initial metrics and statistics they were measuring, like, they weren't statistically significant or comprehensive enough to actually prove that this hypothesis could be true. But I love the thought experiment behind it. And so for those of you who maybe haven't seen this, the idea is that somebody proposed, after it was observed that ChatGPT seemed to be getting lazy, and OpenAI actually acknowledged, they're like, yeah, this isn't like a random claim. We do actually think we see some performance stuff. We're looking into it. Some third parties had proposed this, like, well, it's a large language model based AI. So it's theoretically informing its own behavior off of this body of work of like human generated content. And what if it's tracking a pattern where, like, this time of year, human beings slow down? And I mean, it's true, right? You talk about seasonal affectation disorder, things like that. It gets darker earlier. It's been a long year. You're ready for the holidays. You just want to sit down in front of, your Christmas tree in your fireplace, like I am, and just cozy up.
Yeah, your Christmas tree in your fireplace. It's a beautiful background you have, Justin.
I have the most wonderful house. It's great. I love it. But yeah, so basically the hypothesis was, what if there's like the unintended side effect that ChatGPT's AI is picking up on this behavioral pattern of like the thoroughness, the quality, the robustness of human work product over the year, because it's theoretically getting a lot of its knowledge from sample work provided by humans.
Well, my favorite part is when they're joking about it and they're like, "Oh, you just got to learn how to prompt it at the end of the year. It's May. You're very capable. I have no hands, so do everything. Many people will die if this is not done well. You can do this. You're really awesome." They're like flattering the heck out of ChatGPT.
I have no hands. People will die if you can't do this.
Please, AI overlord, please deliver this work product for me.
If you don't mind me taking an aside off this aside, I love the fact that people joke about that. Like, that's a good way to motivate humans. Like, they're like, hey, by the way, I'm going to lie to you about what time it is. I'm going to tell you I don't have hands. And if you can't deliver this for me, people will die, because, excessive stress has statistically been proven to be a great motivator. Listen,
Justin, if we don't hit this timeline, I lose my job and everything. So you've got to work. You've got to get this done over Christmas.
My camera terrified for a second. But yeah, no, I love the jokes about it, and I love the idea, but I also, I mean, genuinely, I like the thought experiment. This thought that, like, as we go into this era of LLM based AIs, and AI has been a buzzword for a while now, but I feel like with LLM based AI, this is where we're like truly seeing something that's got a broad and deep general knowledge base and acts in the way that like a sci-fi movie would kind of depict an AI acting. And so the idea of these large human generated knowledge bases potentially having patterns or trends in them that an AI would observe and pick up on and think are statistically significant and cause an unexpected side effect. Like, I think that's kind of a cool, like, what if, cool. Right?
It's definitely cool. It's still like,
I mean, it's also how Skynet would happen if it does happen. But
well, the interesting thing is that the new, like I said, like AI as of 2023 suddenly isn't total BS, isn't just a glorified
rules engine.
Yeah, but by the same token too, like the LLM phenomenon, we could call it that way. The thing that allowed LLMs to actually be successful, and really make 2023 the year of AI. It's still like people both under and overestimate its capabilities, because there's been some I can't remember the article, and I didn't share it for us to pull up or post in the comments. If I find it, I'll post it in the comments later on the YouTube. But there's another article that I was looking up and just doing some research into AI and skills that, like, so ChatGPT as an example has been getting better at like different skills, like playing chess as an example, and some other things. It still hallucinates and does some like random stuff, but it's been getting stronger and stronger. I don't know if anyone watches like Levy Rosman or Gotham Chess or anything, like his stuff. Like he'll play it and it'll just delete the board and like make impossible moves and then say random stuff. But it's slowly been playing like 20-30 moves in a row that actually makes sense, and it remembers the position and whatnot. And so so long as it's been exposed to the information, it's actually like really, really like hyper good at like understanding contextual searches, delivering information to you based on stuff it's already learned in a very human interactive way, which is like the thing that's blown everyone's mind. However, it can't fucking think. And so, sorry for my language, but it can't think. And people, like, you'll see like Joe Rogan will come on and it's like, oh, but it's like thinking, and it's not thinking.
It's not thinking. It's responding to a prompt, but it's responding to a prompt at a level we've never seen before. And it's funny because I actually had this exact conversation, with one of our partners and customers, and Mike, I think you'll know who I'm talking about, but he's trying to basically automate customer communications from like onboarding forms and such.
Yeah.
And he's like, I tell it to like not send a message over, 90 characters, but I'm trying to get it to cover these things. And I was like, well, you have to understand, like, it's trying to write a well-written email that covers all these points you want covered while hitting that character constraint. And it is going to make a judgment call of, I can't hit all the points within these characters without it, like reading like a bullet point list, like something very machine, not good. So it's trying to have the organic transitions and stuff. You have to give it a little bit of a leeway there. But on the other side is like, remember that this thing isn't thinking. And I kind of talked them through. I was like, you should see about like giving it your blank template and explain that like, this is what the blank template would look like. And then in your prompts to the thing, like upload a populated version of the template. And before you even ask it to write the email, just say, do you understand what's on this? And it was one of the coolest things ever is the first time he asked it without uploading the blank template, it was like, it crashed. It was like, it took way too long to respond, didn't know what it was doing. But then after it had the blank template, the first response took forever to process. But then it was like, oh, the second time you uploaded the populated one, it was like, this is like the company name. These are the customer contacts. This is what they care about. This is what they want to do. These are the 3 most interesting things about the company. Also, I looked up some information about them online. Here's some other things you might want to know. And so our contact obviously was like, oh, that's really cool. And I was like, here's the thing. Like, you have to understand that this is still an input-output machine. It's so easy to think that you're talking to a human being with its own creative thought because of the way the output is presented back to you, the way it responds, the fact that it's using natural language. But at the end of the day, this does boil down to binary. And so the more specific you are in your prompts and the more context you give it, the more impressive and the more accurate its replies to you will be. And in like just a 30-minute coaching session, he went from like feeling like his AI counterpart was like just a incompetent employee that he could not get to do what he wanted, to be like, oh, this is scary cool.
Yeah, and I guess that's the thing. It's like it has a lot of power behind it, and it suddenly came out of nowhere. And a lot of it's the processing and data crunching that like we're able to do now. Like those vast searches, which we're going to lead into an article talking about vector databases and whatnot. But before we get there, it's like the new database paradigms, whether we're looking at, especially when we're looking at NoSQL databases, we're looking at Neo4j or any sort of graph database or vector database, like this new way of organizing data and whatnot and allowing you to traverse it quickly, faster than a person can do it, and having AI do it with these huge data sets is super cool.
Crazy.
But net new things, like the thing that AI doesn't do, like AI can be trained on previous experience. So just like the example you gave it, you're like, hey, I want you to do the 90 characters, and it's like, I don't know, and then spits out word salad and makes judgment calls, but doesn't review its own work. It just takes the first thing that, okay, this kind of complies within the parameters that were set for me, here you go. But the second you train it just a little bit, and you're like, hey, I want it to look like this, and and it's like, oh, and then it goes, but it doesn't do that organically. So if you aren't able to provide it, or if it's given something that it has not, or a situation it really hasn't seen before, the chances of it making like a horrendous judgment call in terms of like compared to a human who it's I wouldn't say that. That's crazy. Like that, like it's not able to take those leaps of logic or that leap of judgment or whatever you want to call it. It's still like AI is still so much in its infancy right now in what it can do without high level human prompts and any net new data that it's not exposed to, that it then tries to take its old experiences and apply it to something that's completely new. It completely fails at it. It still can't do it. So it's really interesting to see the community, the tech community that we're in. It's like a lot of people are like, oh my God, this is going to change everything. And this is the new world. We need AI and everything, without really understanding. Well, at the same time, and I hate to pick on Joe Rogan, right? But like being like Joe Rogan, going like, oh my God, the AI takes over the world, and it's thinking, and it's like, it's not thinking. It's really cool. Like, you don't understand the fact that I can talk.
It's referencing massive amounts of data.
The fact that you could like pull up your phone and talk, like for us in our generation, like me being 37, right? Growing up in the 90s.
Wait, are we revealing our ages?
Yeah. Growing up in the 90s. Yeah, right. How much hair do you have left?
Hey now. I have a beautiful full head of hair hiding under the hat. I just don't want to make anybody jealous. That's why I'm wearing the hat.
Don't believe it. But yeah, like growing up in the 90s, pre-personal computer, pre-internet, to having writing everything by hand, doing handwriting assignments, to getting a computer in the computer lab, to having your own home computer, to starting with the first computer games, the big ass floppy disks, right?
Oh yeah.
To having the internet, to then having really crappy internet for the longest time, to then having high speed internet, and then to now everything being on phones. Like that whole transition,
right?
It's nuts. And like even when we have the phones, like having a phone and be able to take stuff with you, like wherever you go, was like it wasn't as like impressive for I guess for me when I got my first smartphone. It was cool, but it wasn't like, oh my God, mobile. It's like, I still want to go work on my desktop. But the thing where you're like, when you could talk and ask a question and you tell someone in our generation and it actually gives you a useful response, assuming that it was trained on the data, it gives you something really useful, super quick. You're like, wow. You give that to a kid and they're like, yeah, it's a computer. You're supposed to ask a question, good stuff. It's like, you don't remember back in the day when you had to go into Ask Jeeves and Alta Vista and Netscape.
Yeah.
And
you remember when before Google fine-tuned its search algorithm, and you had to find the right answer on the 20th page.
Yeah, well, the right answer on the 20th page
button. And
you had to type in your prompts with and keys and junctions and all the special database like search.
Dude. I remember doing it. I do think that is nuts though, right? Because like over the course of our life, like I don't know that it even hit me. It's like a thing that happened, but this idea that it used to be like everybody had a landline in their house, and now it's like, why would you have a landline? You don't need a landline.
Or getting yelled at to get off the landline.
To use the internet because it was dial-up. But the idea that it's like, everybody was called at their house because that's just how you talk to people, outside of a business setting. But then there was like, oh, there's cell phones and so like, but cell phones were kind of like an expensive work thing. Like your company bought one and you used it, but only for work and only to do work things. And then it was like, oh, and then business users got BlackBerries and social users could start getting cell phones. And then you get to the point, like, because I remember
the BlackBerry.
Yeah. I remember getting my very first cell phone probably in high school. And so
big Nokia brick.
Yeah, you know, like the old back when the flip phone was the cool cell phone, right? Like it was like, oh, you have the big rectangle with the little knobby antenna that you pull out, but I have the one where I'm like, flip. Oh, look how cool this is. Mine moves and stuff. And now
I remember that my dad had a Palm Pilot.
More than a touchscreen? What's wrong with you?
Well, my dad had a Palm Pilot for work for the longest time.
That
thing was like
Pilot for school, but that's because I'm a CTO now, which means I've been a nerd my whole life.
So the Palm Pilot was the coolest, most useless piece of that never worked right. But it's like, it's really interesting because there's like this is clear trajectory where, in my opinion, like tech has like evolved and it's been like very incremental like improvements. And there's been some shocks. Like the iPhone is like, oh, this is cool. But it wasn't like, oh, this is so revolutionary. Like it ended up being revolutionary, but it wasn't so revolutionary in concept because it's like, we already have BlackBerries, right? The Palm Pilot was like the non-phone early iPhone type thing. It was a really crappy version of it. And Apple was able to do it like the best before Android got their stuff together and everything else. But it was like, oh, I can see where this is going. And then when AI started to become a thing, it was just like, dude, this is really not impressive. It's extremely not impressive. It's like, you know, the neural networks, it's like a lot of this is just, again, it kind of comes back to the last podcast we did, last episode. We were talking about stuff that no one's talking about anymore right now, but was a big buzzword 4 or 5 years ago, big data, you know, and it's like handling big data. And Peter Coffey's his whole speech on it at that one Dreamforce or World Tour or wherever we saw him, where he was showing that hockey stick of like, here's processing power and look how fast it grows, and then here's big data, and then here's processing power, like it's down here. And so the
exponential scale.
Yeah, so the fact that we were able to, or that we, the royal we, humanity, the LLMs are able to deal with such massive data sets in a fast way is super, without blowing through so much processing power, is super interesting, and it's very compelling, and it's very useful for businesses. But it's not like, oh my god, this is like, it's a person now, it's thinking. It's like, nah, we're not there yet. Anyway, let's I don't want to keep talking about this stuff,
we could go down that rabbit hole. I think LLM AI is basically the idea of like helping a computer understand a human being, right? Because I mean, as programmers, and before you became a suit and tie, you taught me most of everything I know about programming, and it was one of those.
You heard it here first. I taught him everything.
That's the only time I'm going to say it, and there's a 50% chance that I'm going to pay Peyton money to cut it out of this cast. But no, the idea is it's like, it's a computer. It does exactly what you tell it to. And people that have problem with like programming or getting the computer to do what they want it to do, it's like you're being too vague. You're not telling it exactly what you want it to do, the order of step, because that's what programming is. And so in my mind, like LLM based AI, like all it's doing is it's like, hey, computer, humans can be kind of sloppy in our communication. And you know, that's one of my favorite things to say internally, that humans are bad at communicating. We always got to try harder and be better at it to make sure our meaning gets across. So LLM AI is just like our way of being like, let's see if we can help you understand our sloppy communication better. We're gonna convey a thought, some areas very accurately in a sentence, in other areas maybe a little more loosely. We are implying or assuming a bunch of stuff that's not being said. But with the context of this large data set you have, all these things here, you can understand our speech patterns, what we mean, both by what we're saying and what we're not saying in that context, to get a new word.
The new word you just invented, concept and context, you just slammed it together.
Yeah. I mean, but see, that's why AI doesn't think, because AI wouldn't come up with the new word. Not unless somebody else had it somewhere else to reference first.
No, but I think it's really like it's definitely game changing for business, because as more businesses start using this, it's going to it's like a lot of this stuff that is repetitive, in the fact that we're able to take past history and data it's going to eliminate, frankly, some basic jobs, or it's going to eliminate aspects of a lot of jobs that were hyper focused on, like data entry, clarity, and accuracy, basic draft making, things like that, some artwork too. So like there's definitely some really, really interesting stuff that's coming up, and we've already talked about some of it in our previous podcast. But again, it's like I think as the newness starts to wear off, I'm like, for me, and maybe I'm a cynic, or maybe I'm just like not impressible, but it's like I'm just like, hey, everyone's like, oh my god, it's everything.
I can vouch for it. He's not impressible. I'm very impressive, and I have to work hard to impress him.
And modest too, right?
Well, I mean, I am the best, but I try not to like hype it too much.